Yo, what it is, YouTube? It's your boy Nitz coming back with another bullseye of a tutorial here today on the channel. I got one that I had a lot of fun making right here. It's gonna be the ECKS vocal tutorial. So we're gonna go over all of the sauce, all the game, how you get that underground type of, sound that ECKS he was really like a pioneer that really pushed the game, And so, if you guys do have any more comments or suggestions for any different type of artists y'all want to see, drop it down below. We more than happy to get to it. So let's not waste no time. Let's get to listening to some music and listening to how you get that sauce,
Why wouldn't it? Got it out the mud, so I'm pouring Sprite through it. Fucked her out the club, said her boyfriend wanna book me. I've been feeling love in some areas I shouldn't. I just paid cash for that bitch with no insurance. Give her right back. Pop another pink. We fell out by the slut. Now you say you peak. Codeine on the bus. I'm pouring to the lean. Pulling in the truck. Spaceship on the seat. I'm still out of love and my number out of reach. I'm flowing the urine in the belly of the beast.
Oh, so that's what we got right there. That's the ECKS vocal tutorial. And ECKS, he was always one of my favorite rappers growing up, when I was in high school, like my freshman year, Lucki, Fauni, Uno, Playboi, Carti. I remember that wave of SoundCloud rappers. I think it was very important. We got to think about this. This is a very important topic right here real quick, is the fact that, before, back in the day, I remember when I was like really, really young, if you wanted to be like, an artist, well, you had to go on like 106 and Park. You had to already be signed to a record label. You had to already be, packaged and prepped out to the masses. That's how, the record industry used to have a real tight grip on the game. But right now with the internet, I think it was very important with that little SoundCloud wave. That was kind of like the first time where the people get to decide who they like. Before, it was always the machine, the record industry that get to pick, okay, this is the rapper, I'm gonna do his image like this, hit pick, and then we're gonna put him out. But now it was like SoundCloud provided a platform where, underground niches could really like come up and stuff like that. So that's why I think SoundCloud was really important back in the day. A couple years ago, where it was the SoundCloud, wave, that was really important because now it made music peer-to-peer, like now, okay, I'm listening to this song. Now I get to choose who my favorite rapper is rather than, a record label putting this person on TV, putting it in front of me, kind of like force feeding me a little bit. Now I get to pick what type of, food or flavor that I like. So that's what I liked about the SoundCloud rapper wave, is it was kind of like that first wave that really let the people get to choose who they like. So I think ECKS is very important. Lucki, Fauni, Uno, Playboi, Carti, Diego Money, Plug, back in the days, like it's so crazy, so shout out to them boys too. So the very first thing that I want to talk about with a ECKS vocal is that, I was looking to see like pretty much what is the composition of his vocal. You got to understand what does the vocal need when you processing a vocal. And I understand that ECKS's voice is not that deep. So because his voice is not that deep, I have to preserve the power in his vocal because this is hip hop. The bass is hitting, dun, 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 dun. You hear the beat. The beat is really like, it kind of sounds like an anthem type of beat. So I wanted to make sure that his voice has power, but he doesn't have that much low end in his vocal. So you kind of gotta create ways of, making the low end in somebody's vocal feel bigger than what it is. So this is like another one of those videos for the people who don't have deep voices. It's very interesting. If you do have a deep voice, it's really a challenge. It's hard as hell when you have a deep voice. It's really hard to mix in general, but when you have a deep voice, like every time it's an uphill battle because all the beats are different. Some beats got more 808 and more bass and more kick than other beats. So it's like you got to shape the low end of your vocal around the beat. So you got to get in where you fit in. So with a situation like Lucki, where he don't got a deep voice, I got to make it seem like bigger than what it is, So I use something like auto-tune, just a little bit of auto-tune, because I heard his voice had a little croak, getting right back, put another foot in the made back. So I had to use a little bit of auto-tune because I wanted to have that little croak kind of ring so the listener could hear, okay, I hear like that mid bass type of thing is poking out. So it makes it a little bit more audible. So it's kind of making the vocal a little bit bigger than what it seems, because now they can hear that little croak in his vocal, and a croak is usually associated with low mid. So let's listen.
Why wouldn't it? Got it out the mud, so I'm pouring Sprite through it. Fucked her out the club, said her boyfriend wanna book me. I've been feeling love in some areas I shouldn't. I just paid cash for that bitch with no insurance. Give her right back. Pop another pink. We fell out by the slut. Now you say you beat. Codeine on the bus. I'm pouring to the lean. Pulling in the truck. Spaceship on the seat. I'm still out of love and my number out of reach. I'm flowing a.
So as you can see, the settings that I used here, sometimes the auto-tune doesn't need to be audible, but this was like kind of like a really clever thing that you can do too, which is like if you hear somebody has a little croak and it was, you know, kind of like that little mid-range type of thing, you can do a little bit of light tuning so that now the listener can hear it. So now because they can hear that croak, they can hear the transition between the out of love and now it kind of makes his voice feel like it just has a little bit more power. Now I can really hear, okay, like that's the belly of his vocals. So it's kind of like if somebody had a fat belly and you pulled their shirt up, that's what the auto-tune is doing. You know, it's exposing that big fat part right there of his vocal, rather than if I didn't have it, you wouldn't really be able to hear the croak of his voice. That's what it's called, the croak specifically. All right, cool. So then after that, let's look at our lead vocal processing. If you guys do want to get this chain, you can go ahead and get it down below. So, you know, go ahead and drop it. So, you know, let's look at this LuckyX EQ move that I did here. So the very first thing is like with LuckyX's voice, I didn't want it to seem too dark. I know Lucki does have like a lo-fi type of sound to it, but you know, with this song specifically, I like it because it was a little bit more upbeat with LuckyX. So this is kind of like the banger that LuckyX really, like, he really dropped in his voice. I just love how it sounds. So I didn't do too much on the top. I wanted to preserve a lot of the high mid in his vocals because his voice is not that deep. So, you know, I did want to use a little bit of that high mid in his vocal to give it a little bit more power. I was like, out of love for another pink. That's an out of rain. Well, another pink. So, and then after that with the you know, the rolling off of the lows, you got to understand the person's voice. You know, you got to custom tailor their bid like a haircut. So obviously I wasn't too aggressive with rolling off the lows. I only stopped at like what, 155. And then, you know, usually I would roll off a little bit more, like maybe 180, but I was finding myself just pulling this filter back because I wanted to keep some of the power in Lucky's voice because the beat is hitting hard. That's what you got to understand, that if you don't have a deep voice or if you do have a high voice, that, you know, you got to preserve the low end of your vocal. You know, there's like, it's not about just mud, you know what I mean? It's about power, it's about energy, about helping that bit stay inside the vocal, you know, the 2-track strong. So then after that, we had this little bell here, and let's listen to what it sounds like with and without.
Why wouldn't it? Got it out the mud, so I'm pouring Sprite through it. Fuck that out the club, said her boyfriend wanna book me. I'm still feeling love in some areas I shouldn't. I just paid cash for that bitch with no insurance. Give her right back. Pop another pink. We fell out by the slut. Now you say you beat. Codeine on the bus. I'm pouring to the lean. Pulling in the truck. Spaceship on the seat. I'm still out of love and my number out of reach. I'm flowing a year.
So that's what EQ is really about as well, is the positioning. You heard how like people always try to talk about, oh, it's about taking out the mud. You got to take out the mud. You got to take out the mud. But not really. This EQ move really just, you can use EQ as a powerful way of positioning to help the vocals sit back in the mix. So that's what this is all about right here. And the next thing that we have is the LA3A. So the LA3A, I copied my hardware preset here and I put it there for y'all. And this is more of like a 1 to 2 dB compression. With this one right here. So I'm gonna save this as well for you guys, so you know, 1 to 2 dB. A lot of my templates already kind of do have like, you know, how much you should do over there. Somebody asked me a good question. They said how hard you should be hitting the template, and you should be hitting it at about negative 18 dB, because that's like where the analog plugins are modeled at. So for example, let's look at the 2-track beat right here, and let's look at this VU real quick.
Why wouldn't it? Got it.
So yeah, that's kind of where all of the templates I have is calibrated for. So just so you guys know, you know, maybe you might want to put a VU before the studio rack, you know, insert with the template, just so you can make sure you're hitting like that zero when it says negative 18 at, you know, 18 at the top. All right, cool. So main thing with the LA3A is that, you know, it's very transparent. I wasn't trying to get too much of the grittiness at that point with LuckyX's voice. It was just in the beginning trying to get a little bit of control of his vocal. And what I actually did is I EQ'd into this compressor. I want to show you guys what I'm talking about when I say EQ into the compressor. So when I first did my EQ move, like this little move was all the way down there, you know, because it sounded better. But then I said, you know what, I'm gonna EQ into the compressor, because the compressor is kind of like a squeezer. Like when you got an orange and you squeeze that bit, you know, there might be a seed that's all the way at the, like the bottom, but you might not even know with the orange up until you start squeezing it. And that's what compression does. It squeezes and exposes things. So I'm gonna show you guys how I like to EQ into compression. So this is kind of like when people say, oh, you know, mixed bus compression too. Mixed bus compression is more like the burger, the macro version. But when you do something like this, it's more like the micro version, the mini version pretty much. So let's look at how I kind of EQ'd, especially with the mid range. You know, I heard more of the mid range because of the compression.
Why wouldn't it? Got it out the mud, so I'm pouring Sprite through it. Fuck that out the club, said her boyfriend wanna book me. I'm still feeling love in some areas I shouldn't. I just paid cash for that bitch with no insurance. Give it right back, pop another.
All right, so what were you doing right there, Nixon? Pretty much what I was doing is I had to EQ pushing the mid-range, going into the compressor to expose like, okay, what is the true problem here? Because originally I thought that, oh, I needed to do the mid-bass cut right here, but then I took the EQ and I started EQing into the compression. The compression is kind of like a trash compactor, squeezing it, it's breaking up all the parts, so I could be like, okay, that's the real trash right there that I need to take out of his vocal, you know. And I did a very light cut, so that's kind of how I did it, you know. I did a mid-bass cut and I pushed it hard into the compressor. Then it was like 5 to 7 dB, so it's really compacting it, really squeezing the sandwich, so I could see everything, every single ingredient inside of his vocal. And I said, you know what, I don't like the taste of that ingredient, and I took it out. So that's kind of like a quick thing on how to EQ into compression. Next thing, we had a de-esser, not doing nothing crazy. I think like 1 to 3 dB.
Why wouldn't it? Got it out the mud, so I'm pouring Sprite through it. Fuck that out the club, said her boyfriend wanna book me. I'm still feeling love in some areas I shouldn't. I just paid cash for that bitch with no insurance.
And listen, you gotta understand too that percussions in a vocal, they kind of like occupy the same like frequency range. So whenever I'm like shaping the S's of my vocal, I'm always listening to like the open hi-hat and the so listen to how like there's a line right here that I just heard where the crash comes in and his voice comes in with an S, and it sounds literally like tonally perfect. Listen.
Fuck that out the club, said her boyfriend wanna book me. I'm still feeling love in some areas.
You hear how that when he said still, like when I said still, like the S literally hit perfectly with the crash. So I build my high end around the percussions of like the beat.
Club said her boyfriend wanna book me. I'm still feeling love in some areas I shouldn't. I just paid cash for that bitch with no insurance. Give it right back, pop another pink. We fell out by the slut. Now you say you beat. Codeine on the bus, I'm pouring to the lean, pulling in the truck.
So yeah, that's really what you know, mixing is really about. It's not about just making, like, it's kind of like how when I always say you can't really get a perfect vocal truly, you can only get a vocal that's perfect for this situation today. You know, you can only do the right play for that situation. Being an engineer is kind of like being a mechanic. You know, not every engine fits inside of every type of car. Every different type of car is kind of like every different type of song, and you got to figure out what type of engine or what type of parts you need to put in it custom for this car, you know. So that's the thing about it, you know. I like to build my vocal around the beat so that it can fit inside the beat, so it sounds like one thing instead of it being like trying to put like the engine for like a Kia Soul inside of like a Hellcat or something like that. You know that bit not gonna fit. It's not gonna generate enough power. So after that, next thing that we got is the C4. So the C4 is my preset. I was going after the low end and Lucki's vocal because I didn't do a lot on the original EQ, but then, you know, I was just being very moderate about it, and I was trying to really just control, especially like the lower mid of his vocal. I want his lower mid to be solid, and especially that's the thing too, because I didn't go after it too much in the beginning, but I still wanted to control it so it could still be strong. So let's listen.
Club said her boyfriend wanna book me. I'm still feeling love in some areas I shouldn't. I just paid cash for that bitch with no insurance. Give it right back, pop another pink. We fell out by the slut. Now you say you beat. Codeine on the bus, I'm pouring to the lean, pulling in the truck, spaceship on the seat. I'm still out of love and my number out of reach.
So you guys got to pay attention too. You see how my C4 is literally like musically moving with his vocal, like how, especially in the high end when he said out of love, you see how the top end is kind of bouncing, and it's like, oh, another paint is bouncing, and that's coming down to the release times. You know, you got to play around with the release times, because that's kind of like if you have like a ball in your hand, it depends. It's more like a flower. Do you slowly let the flower go, or do you completely just drop that bit abruptly? So, you know, every song is going to be different, but just look at how the C4 is moving musically. Compression is always got to be about something that, you know, it's either about making something more dense, it's about making something move and flow. You know, like with this multi-band, I'm actually complimenting his flow. Just look at how the multi-band moving.
Plus said her boyfriend wanna book me. I'm still feeling love in some areas I shouldn't. I just paid cash for that bitch with no insurance. Give her right back. Pop another pink. We fell out by the slut. Now you say you beat. Coding on the bus. I'm pouring to the lean. Pulling in the truck. Spaceship on the seat.
Now you see the low end of his vocal is not bouncing around like that, because I want the low end to be solid. I want to give his vocal some power, so I use the slower release time. All right, cool. Next thing we have is a CLA 76. This is supposed to be a no compression as well, so I'm gonna put that right here for you guys. Zero comp Nix 76. So yeah, this is one is supposed to literally not be even doing no compression, barely, if like 1 dB.
Plus said her boyfriend wanna book me. I'm still feeling love in some areas I shouldn't. I just paid cash for that bitch with no insurance. Give her right back. Pop another pink. We fell out by the slut. Now you say you beat. Cody no.
So yeah, that's what we have. And we got to understand that even with the C4, it's on electro. So that gives it the behavior of 1176. But then this 1176 is more like the makeup gain, you know, for the multiband. The multiband really just clamping down, telling the vocal boy, sit your ass down real quick. And then the 1176 is giving us the level back. Most important thing too is I added some noise to give Lucki some of that lo-fi type of grunge that I feel like he's a guy who really pushed that a lot, and he was amazing with that. Then with the, you know, really what I could do too is you could do compression off, but you got to understand the actual literally like the compression circuitry. Listen to how when I turn it off, like you lose some of that grit, some of that energy is actually lost when we turn off the compression circuit. So that's why I'll be trying to tell you that the parts inside the whip is important. The engine is important. The alternator, the starter, it's important, bruh. The gasket, everything inside the whip is important. So let's look at it.
Plus said her boyfriend wanna book me. I'm still feeling love in some areas I shouldn't. I just paid cash for that bitch with no insurance. Give her right back. Pop another pink. We fell out by the slut. Now you say you beat.
So just literally running the vocal through that compression circuit of 1176, it just gives us this vibe. Next thing after that, I use the SSL G channel on Lucki's voice. And you know, of course, this one is a lot darker than the E channel. The E channel is a little bit more brighter, but this one, SSL G, fits Lucki a little bit better. So you got to understand the color. You know, I would say that the SSLE is kind of like sugar, and this one right here is kind of like SSLG is kind of like something like pepper, or something that's like brown sugar, or something that's a little bit more darker with the flavor. And the SSLG is kind of like drinking a coffee with no sugar inside of it, and the SSLE is like drinking a coffee with sugar inside of it. You know, the SSLE kind of, it sounds sweet, which is good. Sometimes you want to sweeten the vocal, but with the SSLG is more grunge. I just love my person around me. So you got to understand the style of the artist. Lucki, he likes to talk about drugs and, you know, sipping lean and all that dark stuff, that dark light, you know, like he's like, you feel me, that's his vibe. So you got to understand the vibe of the artist before you even like even pick up or touch nothing like that. After that, so we have you know what, let me bring the SSLE in and out. It's not really doing that much, just more like a tonal thing.
Plus said her boyfriend wanna book me. I'm still feeling love in some areas I shouldn't. I just paid cash for that bitch with no insurance. Give her right back. Pop another pink. We fell out by the slut. Now you say you beat. Coding on the bus. I'm pouring to the lean. Pulling in the truck. Spaceship on the seat. I'm still out of love and my number out of reach. I'm flowing.
So yeah, pretty much we had this little low pass right here, this high pass right here, just what, 20 hertz, barely noticeable, just kind of just the little part of his vocal, and I'm keeping it in check. I want his vocal to be very powerful but not overly boomy, so I just used a little bit of that. And the dB octave of this is 18, so it's very moderate, you know. And then after that, we did use a little bit of compression on Lucki's vocal, about 1 to 3. The main thing about this template right here is it's not overly compressed, you know. Outside of the C4, the 3A is doing about 1 to 2, the C4 is doing a couple dB, this one is doing 3 dB. But the main thing about it is that sometimes when you overly compress a vocal, like a vocal that doesn't have that much deepness, usually like a vocal that has a lot of deepness, right? Because deep, like a deeper voice has low end energy in it, right? So low end energy is like when you go to the beach end, is a long time, but high end energy is a lot faster. It's like a splash, squirt, 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 splash. So like when you have something like somebody who has a deep voice, the compressor will eat up a lot more of the low end. And you see how I showed you in the beginning with the mid bass, you know, the low mid bass, those lower frequencies have a lot of sustaining energy that can build up. Okay, cool. So you got to understand that too, because I wanted to leave this vocal wide open. I didn't want to overly compress it, because then it would kind of like just make the vocal sound like it's dull. I want some of the high mids to be like still jump around and still give that energy that Lucki coming in with to match the beat. Okay, then after that we have the Kramer tape. And the Kramer tape, I used 15 IPs for this right here, and it was just really giving it some of that analog tone that I really just felt like helped it sit back in the beat. And then I used over bias. So with under bias, it makes the vocal sound brighter. Where over bias, it makes it sound darker. So I didn't want Lucki's voice to sound like it was too bright, because there's a lot of high mid energy, and sometimes a lack of low end with a lot of high end can make something literally sound brighter, trust me. And using the tape is a good way of just keeping myself in balance, keeping Lucki's vocal just still sounding dark. So let's listen.
Plus said her boyfriend wanna book me. I'm still feeling love in some areas I shouldn't. I just paid cash for that bitch with no insurance. Give her right back. Pop another pink. We fell out by the slut. Now you say you beat. Codeine on the bus. I'm pouring to the lean. Pulling in the truck. Spaceship on.
So that's what the tape is kind of doing right now. It's just smoothing out the high end of Lucki's voice. Some people who don't have a deep voice, you know, I'm seeing recently a lot of people are hitting me up, and that's kind of what I've been making these templates. They say, oh, why does my voice kind of sound like annoying a little bit like that? Well, maybe you got to find out some way to control the high mids. There's multiple ways to do that. You know, you can use a compressor, a EQ, but mostly I would tell you, just because it's less ways of messing it up, I would tell you to use something like a tape plugin, because usually tape has a way of smoothing out the edges of a signal. So yeah, you know, we use Kramer master tape here, and we use the overbias because the overbias makes it sound a little bit darker. All right, then after that we had the de-esser, so we was just vibing with the de-esser, and even the de-esser was moving musically to the music, dog.
Plus said her boyfriend wanna book me. I'm still feeling love in some areas I shouldn't. I just paid cash for that bitch with no insurance. Give her right back. Pop another pink. We fell out by the slut. Now you say you beat. Codeine on the bus. I'm pouring to the lean. Pulling in the truck. Spaceship on the seat. I'm still out of love and my number out of reach. I'm flowing the urines in the belly of the beast.
So yeah, roughly about 3 to 6 dB, and you know, pretty much we're going after that tippity top, but it still sounds so smooth though. It sounds so bright and like still not necessarily mainstream. It sounds bright and very appropriate for the track, you know, because the track is upbeat. No. That's upbeat. That's not usually like Lucki style where he's like, you know, a little bit more darker and down tempo. But usually, you know, that would be something that you can also do with this template as well. You know, it's kind of giving like a neutral type of sound. But then after that, we used a little bit of fresh air, a little bit of 3, just to make that croak in his way, still ring a little bit, and a little bit of 2 just to add to, you know, compensate a counter move. I've been doing so much de-essing, multi-banding, you know, SSLE, tape. I done did so much stuff to really warm his vocal and smooth out the edges that I don't want to lose too much fidelity. I still want to have his vocal sound like, I still want it to still sound up. Let's listen to it with and without.
Plus said her boyfriend wanna book me. I'm still feeling love in some areas I shouldn't. I just paid cash for that bitch with no insurance.
Now see, that kind of sounds like his original style where it's like very warm. You hear how the vocal sounds so warm and like the top sounds round?
Plus said her boyfriend wanna book me. I'm still feeling love in some areas I shouldn't. I just paid cash for that bitch with no insurance. Give her right back. Pop another pink. We fell out by the slut. Now you say you beat. Codeine on the bus. I'm pouring.
So that's what I really like the mid-air for, because it helps make the croak in his voice ring a little bit. So now you hear the transition through the words. I'm still out of love. You feel like now you start to hear the croak in between his words. So the auto-tune was the way we did that. The fresh air was the way we did that. And yeah, pretty much, you know, even the multi-band was the way that we kind of like really just made you focus on it. So it's kind of like an animal. You know, there's certain animals in nature, big. Them animals not big, but when they see a predator, they got to make themselves look bigger than what they are. That's what you got to do as an engineer too. Sometimes you got to make this vocal that don't have that much, you know, power in it sound bigger than what it is, sound more massive than what it is, especially if there's no background vocals, you feel me? So yeah, after that, let's just run through the effects really quickly. We did have an RVox, you know, doing what it always do, nothing crazy. You know, just taking out some of that analog noise. Like I said, I had a lot of noise, helping Lucki's voice really kind of sound like that lo-fi, you know, type of that little bitey, you know, Lucki type of vocal, atmospheric, down-tempo, usually style that he uses. But we had a gate to suppress a lot of that noise, and that is a lot of noise right there. But the good thing about it, it's filling up the space. So it's like what I said about the animals. Some animals, they got to make it seem like they're bigger than what they is. So in order to make this vocal seem bigger than what it is, I had to put some noise in that bit. So every time he rapping, it just sounds more fuller. It sounds like, imagine if, okay, cool, we had a bag, right? And I brought up a bag to you. I said, that bag got $1 million in it, a duffel bag. I threw you a duffel bag. And the bag looks so big. It looks so big and like it's full, it really full with the $1 million. But in reality, I threw some toilet paper in that bit for you, dumb man. And then, you know, just the perception of the size of it would make you really think that it is bigger than what it is. You know, it might not even be money. It might just be some toilet paper. So you got to trick the listener like that. Cool. All right. Next thing, we had a slap delay with Lucki, just kind of giving him some dimension down the middle. I used the R comp to push this slap delay down as well. Very interesting. And I kind of widened it out a little bit. Let's listen.
Class said her boyfriend wanted above me. I'm still feeling love in some areas I shouldn't. I just paid cash for that bitch with no insurance. Give her right back. Pop another pink. We fell out by the slut. Now you say you beat. Codeine on the bus. I'm pouring to the lean. Pulling in the truck.
Usually I would never sidechain a slap, but it's just due to the fact that when the ad-libs came in and the ad-libs was bouncing all over the place, you know, I just wanted to get the space for Lucki. I kind of wanted to make it like a bedroom inside of a house. That's kind of what a slap does. You know, it gives a little bit of dimension kind of within the bigger picture of the song. So like a bedroom with inside of a house. But I had to sidechain compress that bit because like, I ain't gonna lie, like the delay was kind of, I love the way the delay was just jumping around, the level between the delay and the vocal. So levels are always important too, but it just had a nice, really nice bounce to it.
Class said her boyfriend wanted above me. I'm still feeling love in some areas I shouldn't. I just paid cash for that bitch with no insurance. Give her right back. Pop another pink. We fell out by the slut. Now you say you beat. Codeine on the book.
So yeah, that's what I really liked a lot. And you know, in this situation, we didn't use too much reverb as well, just one reverb, one delay. And you know, even with the reverb, it was a completely very small, bright plate. So I'm creating a little contrast. You know, for the most part, his vocal without the fresh air was extremely warm, but then I brought in a bright room sound, very tight, just to help Lucki get that bedroom with inside the house. Like I said, he's got his own space with inside a bigger space. Then we had a doubler, and with the doubler, I let a lot of the low end come through just because I know it was gonna help give a little bit of dimension to the bottom of his vocal. Let's listen to that. It's actually an important part.
Class said her boyfriend wanted above me. I'm still feeling love in some areas I shouldn't. I just paid cash for that bitch with no insurance. Give her right back. Pop another pink. We fell out by the slut. Now you say you beat. Codeine on the bus. I'm pouring to the lean. Pulling in the truck. Spaceship on the seat. I'm still out of love and my number out of reach. I'm flowing a year.
So yeah, I let the doubler really just put in that work on the low end of his vocal. That's why I put the EQ after, but it was kind of like doubling the low part of his vocal pretty much. And that was something like that was like really good and really overpowered because like it just gives more like swag and just more like to the vocal really. So you know, it gave a lot more dimension to it. Then after that we have 1176, you know, just helping Lucki get some of that that's because his voice is kind of like already so swaggy and so down tempo. I wanted to bring in a little bit of energy.
Class said her boyfriend wanted above me. I'm still feeling love in some areas I shouldn't. I just paid cash for that bitch with no insurance.
So this wasn't a song where his flow was going up and releasing, you know, usually that's where I would like my 1176 to pump a little bit because the space in between the words is shorter, you know, you know, when people rap with a faster flow, but he was rapping so slow. I said, out of love. So I made the 1176 pin the needle down just to, you know, I'm going with the flow. Literally, you got to go with the flow when you engineer. Next, after that, I had an L1 as my parallel compressor. And essentially, pretty much what the L1 is doing is it's bringing in some distortion to his vocal.
Class said her boyfriend wanted above me. I'm still feeling love in some areas I shouldn't. I just paid cash for that bitch with no insurance. Give her right back. pop another pink. We fell out by the slut, now you say you peep. Codeine on the bus, I'm pouring tunnelly.
So yeah, I like this L1 limiter a lot because it distorts a certain way. So rather than use like a fuzz box or distortion, I just used the L1 and I crushed the hell out of that thing. I pancaked it just to get some of that. It's actually digital distortion. It's not an analog distortion, but it's a digital distortion that's very pleasing. And with the L1, you got to understand the limiter is like taking like something like a Cuban sandwich or a panini sandwich and just squashing that bit. You know, when you squash something like that, like a sandwich, what happens? The ingredients out of the sandwich start to come out. The mid range starts to pop out a little bit more. That's all we're doing with the L1 really. Then after that, I had a max bass, very interesting, to add some more body into Lucki's voice. So this is like kind of like I know our bass and max bass are different, but this one kind of generates the lows, like kind of like a fake lows type of situation, but it kind of added a little bit more body, a little bit of weight to his vocal. I used the preset Pensado vocal, and then I spiked it up a little bit with another fresh air, just using the mid band. So I'm using this as like a parallel beef pretty much, you know, and it's giving the vocal a little bit more weight, and then the fresh air is kind of like exciting that low mid that I just added, that deep mid. So it's kind of like I'm creating my own like body for his vocal.
Plus said her boyfriend wanna book me. I've been feeling love in some areas I shouldn't. I just paid cash for that bitch with no insurance. Give her right back, pop another pink. We fell out by the slut, now you say you peep. Codeine on the bus, I'm pouring tunnelly. Pulling in the truck, spaceship on the seat. I'm still out of love in my number.
And come on, guys. You got to pay attention to that. Like I said, like frequencies is all about positioning. When I added more low mid to his vocal, guess what? It sounded like he was up closer. Now the vocal sounded like it was way up closer. It sounded like it was way up closer because now you hear more low mid. All right, then last thing. So you guys are getting a lot with this template. You're getting the 2-track leveler. You're also getting a mastering preset as well right here. You know, this is just the run through. This one comes standard with all of my mixing templates moving forward. So just to let y'all know that y'all getting more still for the same great low prices. All right, so let's look into what the template sounded like with and without.
Why wouldn't it? Got it out the mud, so I'm pouring Sprite through it. Fuck that out the club, said her boyfriend wanna book me. I've been feeling love in some areas I shouldn't. I just paid cash for that bitch with no insurance. Give her right back, pop another pink. We fell out by the slut, now you say you peep. Codeine on the bus, I'm pouring tunnelly. Pulling in the truck, spaceship on the seat. I'm still out of love in my number.
So yeah, just really tidying up everything right there. All right, so I know this video is kind of long, but hey, you know, I'm going over everything step by step. You know, like I said, I hate people who make shorts because look, bruh, you can't simplify mixing into something that's 15 seconds, bruh. You know, mixing is something that it takes you hours and hours and hours. It's gonna take you like a long time to get good at it. And you know, pretty much, yeah, I just want to go over everything so y'all know exactly what y'all need to know. You know, I'm not interested in cutting corners. Okay, so then we have a flanger. You know, we have a little bit of EQ for the ad-libs, a little bit of RVox with a tight gate, so it makes his ad-libs sound like they shooting out.
Why wouldn't it? Got it out the mud, so I'm pouring Sprite through it. Fuck that out the club, said her boyfriend wanna book me. I've been feeling.
So that's cool. It's kind of like cutting off the sustain of the ad-libs, because sometimes if you like all of the sustaining part and the noise can start to get into like the reverb and the delay, and it will start to pile up. Then we have a SSL. You know, this is my ad-lib preset for Lucki. You know, just rolling off a lot of lows, rolling off a lot of body. You know, even doing like this cut right here, giving a warming effect, boosting some top to compensate. And then after that, we had an R comp doing some upwards compression. So this is a very good technique if you have somebody who can't get lit on the ad-libs. Use the upwards compressor to and it'll start pumping the ad-libs upwards. It literally adds volume to it, but dynamically though, kind of like in real life when somebody's happy, they start talking a little louder. Oh, ooh, you saw that? Ooh, you know, they might be loud for only a short amount of time. That's what I'm trying to simulate in this mix.
Why wouldn't it? Got it out the mud, so I'm pouring Sprite through it. Fuck that out the club, said her boyfriend wanna book me. I've been feeling love in some areas I shouldn't. I just paid cash for that bitch with no insurance. Give her right back, pop another pink. We fell out by the.
So yeah, pretty much that's what you have right there. Then we have some EQs for this delay for the ad-libs, and the flanger was pretty important. It's what gave it that effect. And then after that, just another EQ. I used the fuzz stomp to make the ad-lib sound gritty, sound very gritty. And then we had a SSLG for the parallel compression on the ad-libs.
Why wouldn't it? Got it out the mud, so I'm pouring Sprite through it. Fuck that out the club, said her boyfriend wanna book me.
All right, and then let's listen to what the ad-libs sounded like with and without.
Why wouldn't it? Got it out the mud, so I'm pouring Sprite through it. Fuck that out the club, said her boyfriend wanna book me.
You wanna book me, wanna.
Don't share. Another ping. Now you be to the league.
So I just like that flanger a lot. I kind of gave a little bit of contrast. It wasn't swimming too much, you know, with the flanger. It was a very light flanging, but it really just helped add some contrast. Lucki did not do no ad-libs on the original version of the song, but I decided to do some ad-libs for myself just because I feel like it needed it. So I just want to say thanks a lot for being a great part of my YouTube channel. I do appreciate you guys. Any more comments, go ahead and drop it down below. I'm more than happy to get to it. This was my ECKS masterclass, kind of like my SoundCloud rapper masterclass. I mean, I don't really like Yee. I don't like Yee, Ken Carson. I don't like them rappers too much. So this is probably the closest that I will ever get to making something like that that applies to those rappers. I love Lucki, Fauni, Uno, them the OGs from my younger days. But I just want to say thanks a lot for being a great part of my YouTube channel. Appreciate y'all now. Peace.